Hello everybody, this is Chuck Holler, and it's April 24th, 2013. I'm doing a video here today because as I watch a lot of the threads on the internet, I've noticed a lot of contributors, we haven't heard very much of them from them since the big date of March 22nd. Now we've seen a lot of dates come and go, but we all have to admit March 22nd really caught everybody's attention. It was the 10th of Nisan. Obama went into Jerusalem, and expectations were just feverishly high that something really major was going to happen. Yet, all of a sudden it seemed like nothing happened. Now, as we went back and we looked at it, some people tried to make some things fit, and it either fits or it doesn't fit. I got to tell you, they were looking for Obama, who everyone believes is the Antichrist, to go and be on the Temple Mount, because it says, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, yet there is no temple, but there is a Temple Mount, and that would be the holy place. Well, we're the temple. As Jesus said, he was the temple. He would rebuild it in 3 days. And it just so happens that where he was born really could be considered the holy place. But that's not why I'm putting this video together. I'm putting this video together, Galatians 6:9. Let us be not weary in well-doing, but let us in due season reap. We need to be careful not to be weary. Let's compare ourselves to what happened 2,000 years ago when Jesus, our Messiah, he came the first time. Those who had been watching the scriptures knew something was going on. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they were looking at Ezekiel, they were looking at Daniel, they were counting the days, and all of a sudden the Star of Bethlehem appears. And these kings from the east, they come. And so they know that something happened, and they're telling stories about this Star of Bethlehem and the 3 kings that came and the wise men that came, and oh, that horrible story of Herod, and he killed the firstborn, and surely the Messiah must be. But then all of a sudden time started going by, and where was he? They didn't know he would be born of a manger. They thought he would be appearing on a white horse. They didn't know he was coming in 2 separate events. It was like a mountain peak, 2 mountain peaks with a valley in between. They didn't see the valley. They looked at the scriptures, they saw a conquering king coming. They couldn't quite put it together. And so 10 years go by, 20 years, 30 years, and they're still holding on to this Star of Bethlehem, and all of a sudden, here the prophet appears, John the Baptist, and he's preaching, and when he preaches, it stirs their very soul, it stirs. And then all of a sudden, here's this man doing miracles. Is it him? Is it the Messiah? And then he's crucified. And then they realized after Pentecost that it was 2 separate events. There was a first coming and a second coming. Well, here we are today, and we know that he's coming back. Probably in 2 events, a rapture and a second coming. A rapture, the great mystery Paul speaks of, we're going to be caught up in the air to meet him when life is going on normal with eating and drinking and marrying and giving into marriage. And then a few years later, a second coming. He comes here. He lands here. Nobody's eating and drinking because 3/4 of the population has been killed, and it takes a bag of gold to buy a loaf of bread. And I mean, life's pretty rough. You're just trying to survive. And so we see all these events. Our Star of Bethlehem, Israel became a nation. We saw that happen. Our John the Baptist, we saw the 6-day war, and yet time goes by, the 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, where is he? And then all of a sudden, this man appears October 28, 2008, and he makes a covenant with the many. And we watch him, and we know that the first part of the tribulation has got to have started, and then on April 11th, the 2 largest earthquakes in history are recorded, which is the end of the 1260 days. Now it looks like there's going to be a lull, and so we're waiting for it to kick back again. And here's this March 22nd date. What's going on? And a lot of people get discouraged. And I'm here to tell you, do not be weary in well-doing. This year, 2013, is a prophetic year. You know, when we look at the four-blood Moon Tetrads that just started this whole thing into motion all over again for these final years here, Mark Billis, the pastor, when he discovered that, it just turned everybody upside down again. And we know that that is a sign according to Genesis 1:14. There will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. And there's only been 6 of these blood red moon tetrads. It's very rare. NASA.gov. You can check it out. I don't have time to go in that right now. But they're lined up with major Jewish events. And in 49 and 50, 1949, 1950, it happened right after Israel became a nation in 48. 68, 69, it happened right a year after 1967, the Six-Day War. Well, here it's coming, 2014-15, a year after 2013. This is that year. Now, March 22nd came and gone, but you know what? There's a lot of dates, and this is not a time to not be watching. You know, when you're a watchman, you're on the walls and you're watching. You're like you're a soldier. You're in the army. That's part of the army, the watchman. And you hear a twig break, and you look, and it's nothing. It was an animal stepping on a twig. And every time a twig breaks in the fort, you look again. Well, God forbid for the watchman who gets weary in well-doing. Even the military, when they attack at 4 a.m., the third watch. Chances are the watchman is going to be sleeping at that time more than any other time. And in the civilian world, when a SWAT team comes in to take out a drug dealer, or they come at 4 a.m. Chances are everybody's sleeping at 4 a.m. And Jesus said, what if I come at the second watch, or the third watch, or the fourth watch? Be not weary in well-doing. Now, we have a lot of dates coming up. Let's just go over a couple of them, and they all have something that could prophetically have something to do with the second coming, or the rapture. The second Passover. This was created for 30 days after the first Passover for anybody who had touched a dead body or was on a long journey. Now let's face it, our Lord's been on a very long journey. And us, when according to Romans 8:10, when we receive Jesus, our body is dead. We're carrying around a dead body because our spirit is alive. So, second Passover, it's a chance that it could come. Well, that's tomorrow, actually, April 25th. The next big date will be the 17th of Tammuz. Now, I'm going to mention some of the Jewish calendar names here, because as a Christian, you should be looking at both calendars. Don't say I'm not Jewish, I don't need to look at that, because in the secular world, there are a lot of cities that live on time zones. You might live in an Eastern time zone. You work across town in a Central time zone. You keep 2 clocks. And that happens all over the country. It happens more than you think it doesn't happen. Well, as a Christian, you should be looking at both calendars, because unlike our calendar, the Lord does things in patterns, and He repeats dates. You know, we don't have a list of things that happened on the 4th of July or on some other major holiday. It just doesn't work that way. But with the Lord, it works that way. Start with the 17th of Tammuz. That's called the beginning of the 3 weeks of woe. And the reason that is, that's the day that Moses, when he came off of the mountain, he destroyed the 10 Commandment tablets because they were worshiping a calf. It's also when the Babylonians seized Jerusalem. And another time the walls were breached. Another time an idol was erected on the Temple Mount by the Romans. 3 weeks later is the infamous ending of those 3 weeks of mourning with the 9th of Av, probably the worst day of mourning in the entire history of the Jewish calendar. It starts off with both temples of Solomon were destroyed on the exact same day. One in 586, I believe, BC. The other one was by the Romans in 70 AD. Excuse me. The 12 spies who came back with a bad report, 10 of them had a bad report, that was done on the 9th of Av. And then as you start coming through history, Hadrian, you always hear stories of the horrible general in the Roman army. Hadrian is at the walls. Who hasn't heard that? Well, in 130 AD, Hadrian plowed the entire city of Jerusalem under and planted salt there so nothing would grow for 100 years. Well, the Jewish people, they're pretty resilient, so he finally, out of a burst of anger, 6 years later, on the 9th of Av, he didn't even know he was doing it on the same day, because on our calendar, it's a different day, but on the Jewish calendar, it's the 9th of Av. He erected a temple to desecrate the Holy Mount. And then some time goes by. In 1096, the Crusades started. We all have heard, we've seen movies about the Crusades. 1290, King Edward kicked all the Jews out of England. In 1306, all the Jews were kicked out of France. In 1492, all the Jews were kicked out of Spain. 1626, I don't have his name, you can Google it if you're interested. A false Messiah was born, and it was recorded on this 9th of Av. They really thought he was the Messiah. He turned out to be a false Messiah. 1882, the Russians unleashed a horrible persecution on the Jewish people in Russia. And then in 1914, World War II started. This is all on the 9th of Av. 1941 is the day, on the 9th of Av, that Heinrich Himmler presented his plan for extermination of the Jews. And then 1 year later, on the 9th of Av, 1942, he implemented that plan, and the first Jews were killed at Treblinka. 1994, the infamous Levi-Shoemaker comet slams into Jupiter. It's the most spectacular astronomical event in modern times. 22 pieces of comet slam into that king planet Jupiter. And there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, by the way. And this happened on the 9th of Av. So, 9th of Av, I've said all that to say this. It's a day of woe. And if the church was raptured on that day, and the two best friends of Israel was gone, the church and the United States, because 65 million Christians in the United States, if they're gone, this country is going to be decimated. That would be a day of woe for them. Moving on quick, after the 9th of Av, we move right on into the three fall feasts. You've got trumpets, that's 7 days. You've got atonement 1 day, and you've got tabernacles, which is 7 days. So all I'm saying, folks, don't forget Hanukkah coming just about 45 days later. So let's not be weary in well-doing. There's a lot of days coming. Now, I know the enemy fights us. Even John the Baptist, that was Jesus' cousin. When they said, where's Elijah? They said, you've seen him in John the Baptist. He has the spirit of John, of Elijah. John the Baptist has the spirit of Elijah. When they were saying, where's Elijah? As he's waiting to get his head cut off, Jesus comes to visit him. And he was very sad. And John looked at him and said, do I look for another? He had doubt. He doubted that Jesus was the Messiah. After he watched the Holy Spirit descend on him as a dove, and the sky break open with a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And even John had doubts. A righteous man falls down 7 times, but gets back up. If you've been knocked down, get back up. You've got a job to do. So, I just want to say, I want to encourage you. I'm praying for you. Pray for me. It's a prophetic year. We know there's a lot of mockers. It's going to happen, but you know what? It's for righteousness' sake. So, if you're going to be persecuted, let it be for righteousness' sake. God bless you, and you have a great year, and I hope to see you in the air. Bye.